Good Shabbos. This week's portion is Baloscha. And amongst the many stories in Baloscha, there's one story about Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe. But although I just called him Yisro, in this week's portion, it calls him Chovav. It's assumed in rabbinic literature, as Rashi states, that Chovav and Yisro are the same person. And even though they have two different names, it's because he was called Chovav because he was Mechavev Yas Torah. He loved the Torah. So it's saying something positive about him. But now that we think that it's the same person, we have a problem because we have two different stories about Yisro. Our first story is a longer story in the beginning of the parsha called Yisro, which tells us that Yisro came back to the Jewish people with Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, Achashilucha, after Moshe sent her away, and he also brought her two sons. It says, Vayichad Yisro, Yisro was happy with what happened. He declares how great the God of the Jewish people is, and they seem to be getting along very fine. They eat and drinks with Aaron and the rest of the elders of the Jewish people. And then not only that, Yisro gives some sage advice to Moshe when he sees Moshe judging the people day and night. He says, this is too hard, it's too difficult, it's hard on the people, it's hard on you, Moshe. You need people to help you. And he establishes a judicial system which Moshe adopts very readily. And then at the end of that story, it says, after all that, it says, Vayishalach Moshe es chosno, Moshe sent his father-in-law, V'yelech lo al arzo, and he went back to his land. And here we have Moshe speaking to Chovav ben Reuel, who we're saying is Yisro, and it says, we are going to the place which God had promised us, and he says, can you please come with us? V'tavnulach, and it will be good for you. God said it will be good. You'll come with us, it will also be good. Please continue on our journey to Israel and reside in the land of Israel with us. So what does Yisro say? He says, Lo elech, I will not go. Ki emal artzi v'moladati elech, because I will go back to my land and my birthplace, which is very similar to the end of the last story where it says Moshe sent him away. There it doesn't say there was a discussion, it just says he sent him away, which is okay, because you can understand. He asked him to stay, he said, no, I'm going to go back, so he sends him away. But that's not how the story ends in Baloscha. In Baloscha it says, do not leave us, Moshe says to him, because you know how to camp in the desert, you will be as eyes to us, and wherever we go, it will be good for you and for us. And then it says nothing more about what happened with Yisro. So it's not clear if he listened or he didn't listen. There's stories later on in the Nevi'im and the prophets which seem to assume that Yisro, or at least his descendants or family, had gone to the land of Israel with them. But it's really not very clear, and it leaves it off with saying, no, please stay with us. So I think perhaps this reflects on an ambiguity that we have, or the Torah has, with outside influences. On the one hand, in the beginning of the stories of Yisro, it sounds like it's exactly what we want. Yisro is the only one who really gives judgment. There's other people in the Torah who question things, and Moshe comes back and says, okay, it will do as you say, like the daughters of Tzalafchad, and the people who wanted a second chance to have the Karban Pesach, to have the Paschal offering. But here, he's just giving straight advice. He says, this is not good, this is what you should do. Very typical of a father-in-law, and we accept it. Moshe accepts it and becomes part of the judicial system of the Jewish people, according to the laws of the Torah. It's all fine and dandy. But yet, there seems to be a problem, because at the end, it ends off saying, and then Moshe sent him away. In other words, we have an idea in the Gemara, it says, if it says that there's wisdom by the nations of the world, you accept it, we believe it. If they tell you that they have Torah, meaning the traditional Masorah that we have, that which is handed down from generation to generation, in Moshe and Har Sinai, no, that's exclusive to the Jewish people. So that's reflected in that story. We adopt a judicial system, and not necessarily the laws themselves, even though I call them laws. It's really the execution of laws through through judges that we could accept and we adopt. But more than that, we have to be careful. We don't want to have too much of an influence. At the end of the day, Yisro is questionable whether he converted, and especially converted the way we think of it today in halachic terms. Did he become part of the Jewish people, or he's still seen as an outsider? He's still the Kohen Midyan he's a priest in Midian, and he says, yeah, your God is greater than all the gods, but he's not saying there are no other gods. There's different ways of reading that, and there's this sense that we take things in, but we have to make sure we keep a distance. And here we have Moshe saying, no, he's chovav, not just that he's dear to the Torah, he's dear to us. He's someone we want, and his father's name is Reuel, which has the name of God in it, El. And therefore, we seem to be saying, no, we love you. We want you to be part of us. It doesn't say that you'll be part of the Jewish people, just as you'll lead us through the desert, you know where to camp. But he's saying you have what to offer, and it leaves it off. It doesn't say really what happened. So again, a simple way to read it is, oh, then he still said no, and then Moshe sent him away. You could harmonize these two stories. But the story itself leaves you thinking maybe he did stay. Because I think it's trying to say, on the one hand, Moshe sent him away. The other hand, Moshe is saying, we want you. On the one hand, we see you as different. We see you as an outsider. The other hand, we have more of a universalistic approach to mankind. And we say, everybody could be close to God. Everybody has ideas. Everybody has something to offer us as the Jewish people, as human beings. And I think that tension still exists with us today. We have to create a balance between what we take in from the outside and how we keep to ourselves. Many of the laws that we have about whether intermarriage or kosher laws, a lot of them are understood by the rabbis as trying to tell us we have to make sure we keep a distance. We have to still remain, in a sense, isolated, or isolated enough to be able to have our own unique approach and to stay as a nation, to stay as a family. We allow people to convert and come in, but they're coming into our family. It's not just a religion, it's a family, it's a nation. And therefore, there's always this continued tension between these two approaches to how we deal with outsiders. And Yisro is a great example because he seems to be someone who's positive. Moshe marries his daughter. His grandchildren are children of Moshe. He comes up with great ideas. He's happy with what happened to the Jewish people. The other hand, very importantly, the language here used is the same language used by Avram. Because by Avram, God comes to Avram and says, Lech lecha me'artzecha mi'moladetecha mi'beis avicha. Go from your land and from your birthplace and your father's house. Here, it doesn't have the last one, but it has Yisro saying, El artzi ve'el moladeti elech. I will go to my land, to my birthplace. He's saying, I'm not willing to give up. And that's the problem in a sense with an outsider. No matter how much they're a part of you, they're still different. They don't want to really be part of you. If they do, they completely convert and become part of the Jewish people, that's fine. But here he's saying, I want to go back. And he actually uses the word elech, I will go. And I will go. And that's very similar to the language that Rivka used. Rivka was also told, do you want to leave your birthplace and your land? And she said, yes, elech, I will go. Yisro was saying just the opposite. I'm not going to go. I want to go back I'm not going with you. I want to go back to my home, to my place where I belong, where my family is, where I'm where I feel like I'm an essential part of that culture. And as long as he's not able to completely give it up, we have a problem of completely integrating with people who are still retaining that outsider view, and therefore that poses somewhat of a danger to us and to make sure that our society, our culture, our religion stays whole. Good Shabbos.